the first thing I noticed wasn't the sound of the excavator. It was the silence. For 6 years, every spring morning began the same way. Birds settled on the cedar fence behind my house, the creek beyond it trickled gently through the drainage easement, and my coffee tasted just a little better knowing I'd finally built the quiet life my late father always wanted for me. That fence wasn't beautiful because it was expensive. It was beautiful because my father and I built it together. Every post had been sunk by hand. Every board had been measured twice before we nailed it into place. 3 months after we finished it, he passed away from cancer. Every time I looked at that fence, I remembered him laughing because we'd accidentally installed one section backward and spent an entire afternoon fixing it. To everyone else, it was just wood. To me, it was the last project I'd ever shared with my father. That Monday morning, I came home from buying fertilizer for my garden and saw an excavator parked in my backyard. 3 workers were already tearing the fence apart. "What are you doing?" I shouted, dropping everything in my driveway. One of the workers looked uncomfortable. "Sir, we've got an HOA work order." "No, you don't." He held up a clipboard. "We were told the fence was an unauthorized structure." I walked closer until I could see the document. The signature at the bottom belonged to Denise Harper. Everyone in Willow Creek Estates knew Denise. She wasn't just the HOA president. She acted like she owned the entire neighborhood. She measured grass with a ruler. She counted garbage cans. She fined people for leaving Christmas decorations up one day too long. If someone parked on the street for more than a few hours, she'd already taken pictures before sunset. I'd managed to avoid her for years by simply following the rules. Or at least I thought I had. Before I could say another word, Denise herself appeared, walking across the lawn in a perfectly pressed white blazer and sunglasses that cost more than my monthly electric bill. She smiled the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." "What is this?" She folded her arms. "Your illegal fence is finally being removed." "It isn't illegal. Our architectural committee has determined otherwise. You approved it 6 years ago." She shrugged. "We couldn't locate those records." "I have the permit." "Then perhaps you should have submitted another copy." I stared at her. "You didn't even notify me." "We mailed a notice." "I never got one." "That's unfortunate." The workers hesitated. None of them looked happy. One older man quietly whispered to me, "I'm sorry." Then the excavator pulled another section down. Boards cracked. Posts snapped. 6 years of memories disappeared in seconds. I ran inside, grabbed the original county permit, the HOA approval letter, and the engineering survey I'd kept in a waterproof folder. When I came back outside, Denise barely glanced at them. "We've already made our decision. This isn't your property. The HOA has maintenance authority." "No, you don't." She smiled again. "You can discuss it at next month's meeting." By then half the fence was already gone. Neighbors had started gathering. Most watched silently from their driveways. Nobody wanted Denise targeting them next. Across the street, Mrs. Alvarez shook her head. "She's gone too far this time." Denise heard her. "Would you like a violation notice as well?" Mrs. Alvarez immediately looked away. That was Denise's power. Fear. Not respect. Fear. By noon, the fence was completely gone. The workers loaded the broken lumber into dumpsters and drove away. The backyard looked empty. Exposed. Wrong. The little creek behind the property flowed quietly as if nothing had happened. Denise paused before leaving. You should thank the board. For what? We've improved your property's appearance. She walked away before I answered. That evening, I called the county building office. The woman who answered sounded confused. Your fence? Yes. We have every permit on file. So it wasn't illegal? No. It was inspected and approved. Can you email me that? Of course. 10 minutes later, the documents arrived. Every signature, every inspection, every approval, everything Denise claimed didn't exist. The county engineer attached one extra note. Please don't remove this retaining fence without engineering review. It forms part of the neighborhood drainage system, protecting several downstream properties. I read the sentence 3 times. Retaining fence. I opened the original engineering drawings. That's when I finally noticed something my father had explained years ago, but I'd forgotten. The fence wasn't simply sitting on the property line. Hidden beneath it was a reinforced retaining wall tied into underground drainage channels. The wooden boards everyone saw were cosmetic. The real structure beneath them redirected heavy storm runoff toward the community drainage creek. Removing it without replacing the support could destabilize the entire slope during major rainfall. I immediately called the county engineer. He answered after a few rings. This is Michael. My HOA removed the retaining fence. There was silence. I'm sorry. They demolished it this morning. Did they obtain county authorization? No. Another pause. Then his voice changed completely. Tell me exactly what happened. I spent 15 minutes explaining everything. When I finished, he sighed. I'm sending an inspector tomorrow morning. Is it dangerous? That depends. On what? Weather. I opened the forecast on my phone. 3 days of clear skies. Then one word filled the screen. Storm. Not just rain. A major system moving in from the coast. Expected rainfall. 6 to 8 inches. The engineer spoke carefully. If the retaining system has been compromised. He stopped. Let's hope the forecast changes. It didn't. The next morning, county inspectors arrived before sunrise. They walked the entire property with measuring equipment. They photographed every broken anchor, every exposed footing, every drainage channel. One inspector knelt beside the creek for several minutes before standing. Who authorized this demolition? The HOA president. He exchanged a worried look with the engineer. She had absolutely no authority. By afternoon, an emergency notice was issued recommending immediate stabilization. The problem was finding a contractor. Every retaining wall company within 50 miles was already booked because the same storm was expected to hit the entire region. The earliest anyone could come was 5 days away. The storm would arrive in less than 48 hours. That evening, I knocked on Denise's door with copies of the county report. She opened it wearing a smug smile. I assume you've come to apologize. I handed her the papers. You need to read this. She glanced at the first page for barely 2 seconds before handing it back. This is nothing but scare tactics. The county says your order created a serious drainage risk. They're overreacting. The storm arrives Friday. She laughed. It's a wooden fence, Mr. Carter, not the Hoover Dam. You don't understand what's underneath. I understand perfectly. She started closing the door. I wondered. Before it shut completely, she looked at me one last time. And when this storm passes without anything happening, perhaps you'll finally stop blaming the HOA for your own mistakes. Friday arrived under a sky so dark it looked more like evening than morning. By 7 o'clock, the first sheets of rain swept across Willow Creek Estates. At first it was exactly what Denise had predicted, just another storm. Neighbors glanced outside, shrugged, and went on with their day. I wasn't as relaxed. The county engineer had called before sunrise. "Stay alert," he warned. "If the water starts pooling where your fence used to be, leave immediately." I spent the morning watching the backyard through my kitchen window. The creek was rising faster than I'd ever seen. Rain hammered the roof nonstop. By noon, the ground behind my house had become saturated. Then I saw it. Instead of being redirected along the reinforced retaining system, muddy water was pouring straight through the opening where the fence had stood. The soil began disappearing a little at a time. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse. It was slow, silent, relentless. I grabbed my phone and started recording. Within minutes, a section of the backyard collapsed into the drainage channel. The water surged through the gap like someone had opened a dam. I immediately called emergency management. "They need to evacuate the lower section of Willow Creek Estates," I said. "The drainage barrier has failed." The dispatcher asked how I knew. "Because I'm watching it happen." 20 minutes later, county engineers, sheriff's deputies, and firefighters arrived. The lead engineer stepped out, looked toward the missing fence, and his face drained of color. Oh no! He didn't need another inspection. He already knew. He turned toward the firefighters. "Start notifying every home downstream." The rain intensified. Water that had always followed the engineered channel was now racing directly into the neighborhood. The first street flooded within half an hour. Storm drains overflowed. Lawns disappeared beneath brown water. Garages filled. Cars floated several feet before slamming into curbs. Families ran outside carrying children, pets, and whatever belongings they could grab. Sirens echoed through the subdivision. From my porch, I saw Denise standing in the middle of the street, staring in disbelief as water rushed toward her own house. She kept yelling at firefighters. "Do something." One firefighter answered without slowing down. "We're trying." Another deputy asked her, who authorized removing the retaining fence. It was just a fence." The county engineer walked over holding the original plans. "No." He pointed toward the exposed concrete footing beneath the mud. "It was part of the neighborhood flood control system." Denise stared at him. "That's impossible. It was approved by the county 6 years ago." She shook her head. "My committee said." "Your committee isn't licensed to redesign stormwater infrastructure." She had no response. The rain continued for another 6 hours. By nightfall, more than 40 homes had water damage. Several basements were completely flooded. The HOA clubhouse had nearly 2 feet of water inside. Ironically, the boardroom where Denise held every violation hearing was underwater. The next morning, the storm finally passed. Helicopters filmed the neighborhood from above. Local news crews interviewed homeowners standing beside ruined furniture piled along the sidewalks. One reporter stopped in front of my property. "So this is where the retaining structure was removed?" The county engineer answered before I could. "Yes." "Could this damage have been prevented?" He didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." His statement aired that evening. Within hours, the story spread across social media. People weren't calling it a natural disaster. They were calling it a preventable one. Neighbors who had stayed silent for years finally began speaking. Mrs. Alvarez showed reporters the warning letters Denise had sent over flowers that were supposedly too tall. Another family shared fines for children leaving bicycles on their own driveway. A retired veteran produced dozens of violation notices over an American flag display. One after another, residents described years of intimidation. The flood had damaged homes, but it had also washed away people's fear. 3 days later, the emergency HOA meeting was packed beyond capacity. Residents filled every chair, the hallways, even the parking lot. For the first time since I'd lived there, Denise walked into the room without confidence. She looked exhausted. The insurance representative spoke first. Our investigation indicates the flooding resulted from unauthorized removal of an engineered retaining structure. An attorney followed. The HOA may be liable for millions of dollars in damages. The room erupted. Someone shouted, "You destroyed our homes." Another yelled, "You never listened to anyone." Then the county engineer displayed the original construction drawings on a projector. He highlighted the retaining system beneath my fence. The visible fence was only the surface layer. He traced the underground supports. This structure redirected stormwater away from the community. Removing it compromised slope stability and altered the designed drainage path. Every eye turned toward Denise. She looked at me. For the first time, there was no arrogance, only regret. "I didn't know," she whispered. I answered calmly, "I tried to tell you." She lowered her head. "I thought you were lying." "No. You never even read the documents." Silence filled the room. Then one board member quietly stood. "I move that Denise Harper be removed as HOA president, effective immediately." Another immediately seconded the motion. When the votes were counted, not a single board member defended her. Not one. She gathered her papers with trembling hands and walked out without saying another word. But her problems were only beginning. Over the following months, investigators discovered the fence wasn't the only unauthorized action she'd approved. Maintenance contracts had bypassed required votes. Landscaping funds had been spent without documentation. Several contractors admitted they had been instructed to perform work before legal approvals were obtained. The county fined the HOA heavily for violating stormwater regulations. Insurance companies refused to cover the losses caused by the unauthorized demolition. The board eventually filed suit against Denise personally, arguing she had acted outside the authority granted by the association. Many homeowners filed their own claims as well. As for me, I never wanted revenge. I wanted accountability. The county partnered with professional engineers to rebuild the retaining system correctly. This time, they used reinforced concrete, steel anchors, and a stronger cedar privacy fence designed to last for decades. When the project was finished, the lead engineer smiled. "This one can handle a much bigger storm." I smiled back. My father would have liked that. He looked at the memorial plaque I'd quietly attached to the inside of the new fence. It read, "Built with integrity, rebuilt with truth." Months later, another major storm swept through the county. Rain fell even harder than before. Neighbors watched nervously from their windows. But this time, the water reached the retaining wall, flowed exactly where it was designed to go, and disappeared harmlessly into the drainage channel. Not a single home flooded. As I stood on my porch listening to the rain, Mrs. Alvarez walked over with 2 cups of coffee. She looked at the new fence and smiled. "You know what? It turns out you weren't protecting your yard." I looked across the neighborhood where children were already splashing in harmless puddles. Families laughed from their front porches, and the rebuilt community looked stronger than it ever had before. "No," I said quietly. I was protecting everyone. Sometimes the strongest things in our lives aren't the ones people notice. They're the ones working silently every single day, holding back disasters no one ever sees. And sometimes, all it takes is one arrogant person deciding they know better than everyone else to discover exactly why those quiet protections were there in the first place.